In reality, there's no way of knowing what you see is the same as what another person sees. Even with the small steps and the giant leaps we've made as a species, there's still a lot to learn about Earth, life, and the human condition. There's still everything we don't know. On the 26th of February 2015, one picture of a dress divided the internet.
White and gold? Where are you looking at?
Oh, just change to white and gold!
Wait, no, you're...
While some saw it as gold and white, others saw it as blue and black. And ever since then, there's been a number of repetitions of the same experiment, either using the same sense, in this case sight, or even other senses, like hearing, in the famous Yanny or Laurel debate. These experiments remind us that there's no way for us to tell that you and I sense the same things. What I call red might just be what you call blue, and there might be someone out there who sees human beings with purple teeth, but just refers to it as white. 71% of the entire Earth is covered by water. Humans are made up of about 60% water, potatoes 80%, watermelons 93%, and cucumbers 95%. It's very clear that water is essential for life on Earth, but we really don't know that much about water, not even about the very oceans we came from. In fact, we've only explored 5 to 10% of the Earth's oceans. The rest? Well, who knows what's down there? It's even scarier when you realize that fish, like the blobfish and the barreled eye fish, belong to the slim percent of things that we've already discovered. The deeper you go, the crazier things seem to get. What's at the bottom of the ocean? For the most part, we just don't know. But back on the surface, countries that are bordered by water use something called coastlines to mark their territory. The coast is the land along the sea, and the boundary between the coast and the sea is known as a coastline. So, how long is the US coastline, or any other coastline in the world? The answer is, well, again, we don't really know. Coastlines constantly curve and cut in and out. Even the smallest deviations from a straight line can have a distance, and over time, these small distances add up. Some of these features are massive, like bays, while others are minuscule. Now, measuring each and every little crevice isn't really efficient, so surveyors cut corners and straighten rough edges into easily manageable lines. If you do a quick Google search of the measurement of any coastline, you'll find a lot of different answers. They all cut corners, just differently. Humanity as a species, though, well, we've done really well for ourselves. When in a pinch, we invent something to push us through. We made clothes when the weather was harsh, shelter so we could be safe from wildlife to rest and recuperate, weapons to hunt for food, money to replace pure bartering. But what about fire? Was fire a discovery or an invention? And music? Music has been described by scientists as a relatively recent invention by humans. It's believed that music helped our ancestors to bring together a close-knit community. But did humans really invent music? Or did we just discover that certain sounds sound nice with other sounds? Birds sing, whales sing, even tree frogs have a nice rich baritone sometimes. So can we really say man invented music? If we did, then what is the true definition of music? I guess we'll never know. On the list of man's greatest inventions has to be tools. In fact, for a really long time, scientists were pretty sure that this is exactly what made us human. We were the only animals who, through the use of such a variety of tools, were able to expand and grow so quickly. Except, we aren't the only ones who use tools. A lot of animals, mainly primates, use tools for all kinds of reasons. A study by Jane Goodall on African chimpanzees would change the definition of man forever. In the research, it was discovered that these chimpanzees use tools to gather food, brush their teeth, and even more. So in response, would this mean we must now redefine man or redefine tool? They use tools for the exact same things we would. Do we accept chimpanzees as human? Well, of course not. This begs the question. If using tools doesn't, then what makes us human? In the same research, it was also discovered that chimps had individual personalities and were capable of rational thoughts like emotions and sorrow. They gave pats on the back, hugs, kisses, and even just messed around with each other just for fun. They developed affectionate bonds with family members and with other members of the community, and some of these bonds lasted for over 50 years. If emotions, rational thought, and affectionate actions do not, then what makes us human? In the past, it was thought that humans were the only animals who were self-aware. However, in the past 30 years, extensive research has proven that many other animals are too. In fact, in 2012, a group of neuroscientists created the Cambridge Declaration on Consciousness, which states that humans are not unique in possessing the neurological substrates that generate consciousness. Non-human animals, including all mammals and birds, and many other creatures, also possess these neural substrates. If consciousness, sentience, wakefulness, and the ability to feel and experience do not, then what makes us human? We really just don't know. All we know is that one day we weren't, today we are, and one day we will be no more. We don't know what happened before we existed, and neither do we know what will happen after we die. If a person dies and comes back to life, it's referred to as a near-death experience, because we see death as a finality. But what if it isn't? What if one of the beliefs of humanity's many religions is true? Even the Earth itself can be very weird, and sometimes you just see formations that make no sense. Like, who built Stonehenge, and why? The same goes for the pyramids. Some people think the gods of Egypt made the pyramids, others are convinced it was made by human effort. But, in reality, we just don't know. The human mind is everything. All of man's greatest inventions, theories, and discoveries have all come from a human mind. We first conceive of an idea in our mind before we can ever create it in the real world. But perhaps we don't yet know or understand exactly how powerful the mind can be. The placebo effect gives us a glimpse. I made an entire video about the placebo effect, but basically, doctors appear to give a patient treatment, but in actuality, they don't. However, this fake treatment registers in the brain, perceives it as real, and kickstarts the healing process. Basically, the mind heals the body because it thinks the body is getting treatment, even if it isn't. In research on social, cognitive, and affective neuroscience, it was discovered that self-affirmation helps to maintain a positive self-view and helps to restore your self-confidence and self-worth. Simply by telling yourself nice things, it is indeed possible for your mind to convince your brain and body that you are those things. And these are just the things we know the mind is capable of. Think about everything we don't know. There are a lot of things we know about animals. Dogs are sweet and loving, cats can have an attitude, and the lion is apparently the king of the jungle, even if it lives in the savannah. Not everything makes sense, and we really don't know as much as we think we do. Going to space is one of man's greatest achievements. However, what space exploration has clearly shown us is just how small we are in the grand scheme of things. There are at least 2,500 other solar systems that have been discovered, but that number could go up to the tens of billions. We just can't know for sure. That's just in our galaxy, the Milky Way, and the Milky Way is just one of billions of galaxies that are out there. It's so incredibly massive that you just can't help but think, are we alone in the universe? And if we aren't, why hasn't anyone said hi? We have ideas, but as always, we don't know, and we really can't prove most things. A very fundamental question for nature is, what exactly is the universe made of? And why is there stuff in it to begin with? We know that almost all matter is made up from indivisible atoms. But why? Why do atoms exist, and where do they come from? When we die, what exactly do those atoms become? Everything else? At this point, you've listened to me talk for about 7-8 minutes. Time is persistent. For everything with mass, time never stops. We all know that yesterday is in the past, today is the present, and tomorrow is the future. But what exactly is time, and where does it come from? Even more confusing is, did humans discover or invent time? There are so many things about the world that we just don't know. And while some are deep questions like we've talked about, others are more, well, trivial. While watching the video of this person yawning, you probably also yawned. So even more importantly, why is yawning contagious? When we're happy, we laugh. When we're sad, we cry. But why? For a long time, it was believed that laughter was a social tool to show one another that we're enjoying what's currently happening. It was an evolution tool used to help enhance connectivity in societies. But if that was the case, then laughter should be unique to us humans, or at least primates. But it's not. Other social animals like dolphins and even rats laugh. So why do we laugh? Also, why do we cry? It's as if crying has emotional healing powers. Crying activates our parasympathetic nervous system and helps return our bodies to a normal, fully functional state. It's a good thing for your body, so why do we associate it with such sad things? We often cry after something bad has happened, not really while it's happening. Is it a process that evolves solely for our brains to process emotionally painful things? Then again, we cry for happy reasons as well, so scratch everything I just said. Why are some people right-handed and others are left-handed? Why isn't everyone ambidextrous? Wouldn't that have made a lot more sense? We can have theories for many, many things, but they remain just that, theories. In actuality, proving theories as a fact of nature is a lot harder than you'd think. Many scientific theories are superseded with time, considered obsolete, or simply wrong. We used to think that Earth was the center of the universe. Then one day, we realized it wasn't. Then again, not everyone could accept the fact that their view of the universe was so wrong. I mean, there's a theory that as recently as World War II, the Germans attempted some advances under the impression that the Earth was hollow. So, it is very possible that mostly everything we do know about the world right now is wrong. Honestly, it probably is. We simply don't know everything about everything. And that's okay. All we can do is keep asking questions and keep learning about the world around us, trying to uncover each of its mysteries one stone at a time, hopefully answering the most important question of them all. What does existence truly mean?
If a tree falls down in the forest and no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound? How do you know? Taking it one step further, if you hear the tree hit the ground but don't see it, why do you trust your sense of hearing? This might seem like a ridiculous question, but the truth is that despite our total reliance on them, our senses deceive us all the time. You hear this audio and some of us hear Yanny while the others hear Lol. You think you hear your friend laughing in the other room, only to come out and see it's just the TV. A stick that looks bent in the water turns out to be straight when you pull it out. You spend what seems like hours walking through a dark and creepy forest, but then wake up and realize you were just dreaming. The world is a strange place, and for all the knowledge we've managed to gather as a species, there's still a lot more that we don't. Here is everything we don't know, too. I think, therefore I am. You've likely heard this phrase before. Coined by 17th century French philosopher René Descartes, the simple declaration serves as the foundation of all modern philosophy. It's a statement of knowledge, an assertion that if I know nothing else, I at least know I exist. While this may not seem like a revolutionary idea at first glance, it's actually quite significant. Philosophers since the time of Socrates have wondered whether or not it's possible to know anything, because it always seems that the more questions we ask, the fewer answers we're left with. Descartes himself was renowned for his astonishing ability to doubt everything, no matter how trivial, no matter how seemingly obvious. He treated all of his ideas with a radical level of skepticism, believing that doing so would eventually lead him to the truth. This skepticism led him to ask a question that science still hasn't been able to answer. How do I know I'm not dreaming right now? Or, even more frightening, how do I know that my mind isn't being deliberately misled by some evil genius? Think of it like the movie The Matrix. It's possible that, at this very moment, you're hooked up to a giant machine that is feeding you all the sensory data you're currently experiencing. You aren't really watching this video, it's just the machine making you think that you are. While unlikely, technically it is possible, and there's no way we can disprove it. This is why some people argue that we live in a simulation. Do we, or don't we? We just don't know. Descartes argues that our inability to rule out this scenario forces us to doubt everything we think we know, a state of radical skepticism in which we can't trust anything we experience or think. Fortunately, Descartes offers us a way out. Even if we are forced to doubt everything, the one thing we cannot doubt is the fact that we're doubting. If we can doubt, then we can think, and if we can think, then there must be a mind doing the thinking. So while we may never know whether or not the world around us is an illusion, or if we even have physical bodies, we can rest easy in the knowledge that we have minds, that we exist, right? Well, not so much. Later philosophers from Kierkegaard to Heidegger criticized Descartes' claim, arguing that the existence of thoughts does not necessarily imply the existence of a thinker. Friedrich Nietzsche even went so far as to say that the idea that there is something called thinking is itself an assumption. All we can really say then is that something is happening. What that thing is, we just don't know. If you're rolling your eyes at this point, it's understandable. To most people, this all sounds like a bunch of over-intellectualized nonsense with no bearing on the actual world. Even if we do live in the Matrix, I still know that 2 + 2 = 4, that the sun is going to rise tomorrow, and that the earth beneath my feet is solid. Well, hold up on the last point. Part of the reason why it's so difficult to say whether we truly know anything is because we live in a dynamic universe where nothing is ever stable. Everything in existence is always moving and always changing, including the Earth itself. Even as you watch this video, the very face of the planet is evolving. Plate tectonic theory is a relative newcomer to science. First pioneered in the 1960s, our understanding of how the Earth shifts and moves is still fairly limited. We've discovered certain things, like the fact that the Earth's rocky crust is in the form of plates that sits on top of a mantle of liquid magma. As this magma circulates and churns, it pushes the plates around, knocking them into each other and creating earthquakes, volcanoes, and mountains. What this means is that, contrary to what we think, the ground beneath our feet isn't solid. It's constantly changing, and if it is, how can we say we know it? Tomorrow an earthquake could reshape our continents, and so the best we can ever have is a rough approximation of what we think it used to be, not what it actually is. Maybe I'm just trying to strong-arm a metaphor here, but it seems like whenever we investigate what we think we know, our ideas start to crumble. It's an interesting quirk of reality, really. The simpler a question is, the harder it can be to answer. It's for this reason that many people fear death, because we simply don't know anything about what happens after it. Yet I cannot help but think that the fear that we don't know anything about death presupposes that we know what life is, because in reality, we don't know either. While it's easy for us to tell the difference between living and non-living materials, say like an apple versus a rock, but when we try to pin down a precise definition of life, things get complicated. All life forms, whether a plant or animal, bacteria or fungus, are composed of cells and are able to meet certain basic fundamental conditions. These include responsiveness, metabolism, energy transformation, growth, and reproduction. For instance, when you smell food, you respond by feeling hungry. Eating a sandwich then starts your metabolic process, which allows you to convert calories into energy. This energy is then used to do things like grow muscles or attract a mate. But this is what life does, not what life is. The main problem is that the primary feature of life is that it's always changing, and definitions by their nature are meant to be static. Perhaps if we knew where life came from, we'd have a better sense of what exactly it is. Unfortunately, we don't know this either. Of course, one day science will figure this stuff out. The secrets to life, the Earth, and everything else will be unlocked. All it takes is more advanced technology, more sophisticated methods, and we'll be able to know the answers for certain, won't we? Here's the thing though, science isn't ever 100% certain. When researchers at the European Organization for Nuclear Research, otherwise known as CERN, announced the discovery of the Higgs boson in 2012, they did so by stating that their observations had passed the crucial threshold of 5 sigma certainty. To most people, this term is nothing more than academic jargon, but sigma in this context is the statistical unit of measurement used to determine how probable it is that a given result is correct. The higher the value, the more likely a particular finding is true, with 5 sigma being the gold standard, representing a 1 in a million chance that a given observation is inaccurate. Though, there's still a chance. You may think I'm splitting hairs here. After all, 1 in a million is as good as true, isn't it? Well, no. A 2011 experiment conducted by CERN reportedly found that a series of nearly massless ghost particles, called neutrinos, had traveled faster than the speed of light. This was, of course, impossible, as the finding violated Einstein's principle of relativity, yet the experiment passed with a 6 sigma confidence, meaning that it had a staggering 1.5 billion chance of being false. And yet it was. 4 later experiments all failed to replicate the original results, and the first experiment was written up as a fluke. Science is very good at explaining what is happening and how it happens, but not really why it's happening. Pass any scientific revelation through a series of why questions and you'll always get to a point where we just don't know. Take gravity, for instance. When an apple falls from a tree and hits Isaac Newton on his head, we know it's gravity. We can even measure it as 9.8 meters per second. But when it comes to explaining why this happens, almost 350 years later, we're still clueless. Every other physical force in the universe, electromagnetism, strong and weak nuclear force, has a corresponding subatomic particle. Yet we still don't know what the particle responsible for gravity is. Physicists have theorized the existence of something called a graviton that, similar to the Higgs boson, requires massive amounts of energy to detect. In fact, it's predicted that it would take a mass spectrometer the size of Jupiter operating at 100% capacity to identify one. But why is a graviton so hard to find? Why is it that physics behaves like this, and is it possible that it could work differently? The notion of alternate physics is most commonly associated with the multiverse theory, the idea that there isn't a single universe but an infinite array of different universes. We don't know if this is true, of course, but if it is, then it's possible that among these countless variations, there exists other types of physics. Maybe in another universe, gravity isn't so difficult to measure. Maybe instead, electromagnetism is the rogue force confounding their scientists. But it isn't just other universes that may operate under alternative sets of physical laws. Even our own universe may be subject to alternate forms of physics that we've yet to discover. In 2022, researchers at Columbia University programmed an AI to study video footage of different physical phenomena and then search for the minimal set of variables that described its observations. The footage included things like a pendulum, a lava lamp, and a fireplace. When the AI returned its results, the researchers found that they could identify some of the variables that the artificial intelligence had defined, but not others. The belief is that the AI was applying novel sets of physical laws currently unknown to humans. Unfortunately, since the program can't communicate what it's thinking, the exact variables remain a mystery. However, it does raise an interesting question. If we were to meet an alien species, is it possible that they might use alternate laws of physics? Ted Chiang's novella, Story of Your Life, the inspiration for the 2016 film Arrival, explores this idea. Fair warning, there's spoilers ahead. In the story, humans make first contact with aliens after dozens of spaceships suddenly appear in orbit, but rather than wanting to take over the planet, it seems that the extraterrestrial visitors just want to talk. To get the conversation going, both humans and the aliens work together to slowly decipher one another's language, as well as their respective approaches to physics. It quickly becomes apparent that the scientific and mathematical concepts that are advanced to us, like calculus, are elementary to them. Surprisingly though, the reverse is also true. The aliens deploy strange, seemingly convoluted methods to describe basic principles like velocity. While both methods provide accurate results, each is highly specific to the species that developed them. Eventually, it's explained that the aliens don't perceive our universe as causal. Instead, they witness all events as happening simultaneously. This accounts for their weird set of physics. Chiang's Story of Your Life raises interesting questions surrounding concepts like time, perception, free will, and subjectivity, forcing its readers to wonder if there's such a thing as objective reality. How do we know that the reality we experience is independent of our own consciousness? This problem has plagued philosophers since antiquity. Plato, in particular, is known for having proposed the idea of the realm of forms, a non-physical, immaterial plane from which the physical world manifests. Science actually functions on a similar principle, assuming that there is an objective reality that exists beyond our senses, which can be observed and measured. Despite our best efforts, though, no one has ever confirmed the existence of an objective reality. In fact, given that everything we know has to come first to us through our senses and therefore our own subjective perception, it's impossible to prove an objective reality. We'll just never know. In his book, The Spell of the Sensuous, philosopher David Abram argues that the very idea of an objective reality isn't representative of the universe we live in. In actuality, Abram says we exist in the realm of inner subjectivity, a term he borrows from the German philosopher Edmund Husserl. This form of reality, rather than being a separate and isolated phenomenon, is created by the collective experience of all its participants. The universe doesn't exist as an object of our subjective perceptions. Instead, it arises out of our very interaction with it. If this idea sounds a little out there, consider quantum mechanics, where our mere observations literally affect the state of matter. Just by measuring a photon of light, we're able to change it from a wave to a particle. So maybe there's no such thing as objective reality. Maybe all that exists is our collective, intersubjective experience. There's simply no way of knowing. Plunging into the depths of uncertainty is never pleasant. That's why humans came up with reason and science in the first place. We want to feel as though we know things. It gives us a sense of control in an otherwise chaotic, unpredictable, and sometimes dangerous universe. For the majority of my life, I was agnostic about most things. If there wasn't what I deemed to be rational, scientific proof to support an idea, I just didn't believe it. But the more I learn, the more I realize how limited my own experience is, and just how much we as a species don't know. Ordinary matter accounts for just 5% of the entire universe. The rest of it, 95% of everything that exists, is a complete and total mystery. We just don't know. It seems naive, if not outright arrogant, to close myself off to new ideas just because they don't fit within my current understanding of how things work. Tomorrow the Earth could shift, life as we know it could completely change, and everything that science has taught us could turn out to just be a fluke. But rather than meeting this dilemma with fear or outright projection of scientific principles, we should take it as an opportunity to learn, embracing uncertainty as a means of transforming our perception. To me, this seems like the only rational path forward. Because as it turns out, everything we don't know is, well, everything.
Tim Cook of Apple, Sundar Pichai of Google, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, the President of the United States. When you think of the people controlling the world, these names come to mind. But the truth is, while these people have a significant influence over our lives, 4 companies secretly control the world, and only a handful of people hold significant power in those companies. These are the people who have the potential to change your life for better or worse, without you ever realizing what's happening. I made a video talking about how BlackRock controls the world, and unsurprisingly, they are one of the 4 companies we'll discuss today. Altogether, these 4 companies manage almost $24 trillion worth of assets. They have the most influence over the United States' monetary policy and operate with very little oversight, which means they're free to do almost anything they want. And their power doesn't end in the United States. These companies also own a significant stake in the vast majority of European companies that are listed on the US stock exchange. Now, you might think this is an exaggeration. How can 4 companies control so much wealth? But it is true, and the information is available once you just look for it. From the largest retail stores like Walmart and Home Depot to transportation companies like GMC and Boeing, pharmaceutical companies like Merck, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and media companies like Disney, Viacom, News Corp, NBC, CBS, Time Warner, and AT&T. They influence the banking system as they're involved in every decision made at the largest financial institutions like Bank of America, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and Citigroup. In the United States, the U.S. Federal Reserve, the country's central banking institution, has board members who represent these 4 investment firms. Global financial institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank are influenced heavily by these companies. So, who exactly are these 4 companies? Before I answer the question, when researching this topic, I was bombarded with a lot of data. The largest of the 4 companies, BlackRock, was founded in 1988 by Larry Fink. Like the other 3 firms, BlackRock is a fiduciary, which means that a person has placed trust in them to act in their best financial interest. BlackRock does this primarily through mutual funds, a collection of assets that invest in stocks, bonds, and other securities like real estate. BlackRock currently has 70 offices in 30 countries around the globe and holds $10 trillion in assets. The company is currently worth $20 trillion, which is half of the US's yearly gross domestic product, or GDP. This is the measure of value created by a country by producing goods and services. The other 3 companies are Vanguard, State Street, and Fidelity Investments. Vanguard manages $7.6 trillion in assets and is the world's largest issuer of mutual funds. At the end of 2022, it had 203 US funds and 227 international funds, which served its 50 million investors. Vanguard's founder, John Bogle, created the Indexed Investment Fund in 1976, now known as the Vanguard 500 Index Fund. You might be wondering the difference between an index and a mutual fund. An index fund is a type of mutual fund that is passively managed as opposed to other mutual funds, which are actively managed. So when Bogle invented this index fund, he created a formula to track returns on the market and invest accordingly. State Street is owned by Vanguard now, but is the second oldest continually operating US bank. Its predecessor, Union Bank, was founded in 1792. State Street manages $3.9 trillion in investment assets, along with Vanguard and BlackRock. It is one of the prominent 3 index fund managers that dominate corporate America. Fidelity Investments manages $4.3 trillion in assets. It was founded by Edward Johnson II in 1946 and has remained a family-owned and operated business ever since. Fidelity was the first major American finance firm to market mutual funds to everyone via mail and door-to-door sales. Before they opened their doors, the mere idea of investing had been reserved for wealthy individuals. Hearing that alone, you might be wondering what exactly is wrong with these companies. They all sound like industry pioneers who have done incredible to stay in business for so long. And while that is entirely right, it's only half the story. To figure out the other half, let's start with what these companies tell us they do. Each of these firms helps everyday people invest their money, and whether you're a multi-millionaire or an hourly worker looking to create a small investment fund for your family, they've helped democratize investing. And often, investing with them can seem like a good idea, especially lately. Because in today's world, we're not just worried about making money, we're concerned about making money and helping move society forward. That's where ESG investing comes in. ESG, which stands for Environmental Social Governance, is a type of investing that considers social and environmental factors. So basically, what is the company you're investing in doing about environmental issues like climate change? All 4 of these firms advertise their commitment to ESG. As you would expect, some people have mocked these firms' stance on ESG, calling it woke investing. In response, companies like BlackRock have responded by saying it's not woke, it's capitalism. The way they see it, climate change poses a risk, so investing in companies that further the effects of climate change is also a risk. On the flip side, investing in companies trying to mitigate that risk is good business. To give them all the credit, they've put their money where their mouths are. In 2021, Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street successfully shook up the board of ExxonMobil by installing new members who promised to take on climate change. And BlackRock let the state of West Virginia, a huge coal producer, pull out of the investment firm due to their pledge to invest in net zero companies. But when you peel back the curtain, it's not as wholesome as these firms would like to make it sound, especially when it comes to ESG investing. Every single one of these companies is about as hypocritical as they get. Vanguard specifically praises its own ESG investing, while also owning $86 billion in coal companies, making it the world's largest investor in the industry. BlackRock is the top investor in fossil fuels and deforestation, war profiteering, and doing business with human rights violators. Look no further than BlackRock's deal with the Chinese government. The firm became the first company to have access to China's vast mutual fund market, followed by Fidelity. This left many skeptics wondering, what did they promise President Xi Jinping? With this deal, these 2 companies will be pouring more and more money into the Chinese companies, which are primarily controlled by the Chinese government, a growing adversary of Western democracies. Even more controversial are the firm's investments in Russia. All of these companies had assets invested in Russian companies, and once the war broke out in Ukraine, they all responded, at least publicly, by freezing those investments or pulling out of them altogether. Whether or not those assets will stay out of Russia long-term is questionable. Regardless, years and years of investments from these 4 companies undoubtedly helped fund Putin's invasion of Ukraine. No matter how you slice it, these companies are riddled with conflicts of interest. In Ukraine, BlackRock is one of the leaders trying to advise the country on rebuilding once the conflict is resolved. This might seem benevolent, but not all that glitters is gold. In reality, BlackRock is simply capitalizing on a war that their funds helped finance so they can make more money closer to home than the others. The Johnson family, which founded and runs Fidelity, also runs a venture capital arm that competes with Fidelity's investments, which means the family benefits, while Fidelity investors get a crappy deal. For example, from 2011 to 2012, F Prime Capital, the family's venture capital arm, invested $11 million in Ultragenyx Pharmaceutical Incorporated before it went public. This investment prevented Fidelity's mutual funds from making the same play because, if it did, it would have violated US securities laws, so the family-owned fund got the better stock value while the public funds, which invested in the company at a higher rate, kind of got screwed. Essentially, these companies, which have immense power and control in our world, tell us a manicured PR statement about what they're doing, but in reality the story is much more complicated and problematic. None of their success would have been possible without the various proprietary technologies they developed to help their investing strategies. The prime example is BlackRock's Aladdin technology, which began the trend of using technology to minimize the risk of investing. It manages 20 trillion in assets and predicts the outcome of every single investment while getting information and personal data on everyone who knowingly or unknowingly gave BlackRock their money. This technology and others like it are perfect for investors. They've helped to lower the cost of managing the investment while improving returns. This type of technology is what makes companies like BlackRock and others grow. It gives them an edge. It allows them to apply their investing strategy company-wide. It'll enable investors to diversify their portfolios more effectively. Technologies like this democratize investing, allowing anyone of any level of wealth to benefit from a sound investment strategy. This is why over 80% of all assets invested over the last decade have gone to these four companies, but at what cost? And if these companies continue to revolutionize, advance their technologies, and control more and more investor assets, then what? We're at risk of ownership concentration. If BlackRock, Vanguard, Fidelity, and State Street continue increasing their influence over the biggest companies across every industry, competition is just gonna decrease. They'll be competing with themselves, which isn't competing at all. This leads to less consumer choice and higher prices, and we can see this already happening in the airline industry. Over the last 14 years, airfares have increased by as much as 7% because there's less pressure to compete. BlackRock and Vanguard are among the 5 largest shareholders of the biggest 3 operators. But this isn't just about the companies, it's about the people who run and own them. The people who make the decisions, pull the levers, and hold so much power you can't imagine. Starting with Larry Fink, the founder, chairman, and CEO of BlackRock. He started out at a New York-based investment bank where he rose to manage the firm's bond department. Unfortunately, his career there ended when he lost his department $100 million after an incorrect prediction about interest rates. This led him to focus his next venture on investing in risk management, and BlackRock was born. He founded the firm in 1988 and grew it from $5 million to $8 billion in just 5 years. Abigail Johnson, CEO of Fidelity Investments, didn't grow the company she leads from the ground up. She's the granddaughter of Fidelity's founder, Edward Johnson II. She started as an analyst and portfolio manager at the company before being promoted to the president of Fidelity's asset management division. In this position in the early 2000s, like an episode of Succession, Johnson unsuccessfully attempted to remove her father as CEO over disagreements about how to lead the company. It wouldn't take too long for her time to come though, as in 2014 she was named CEO. State Street CEO Ronald O'Hanley has ties to Fidelity, having previously served as the president of asset management and corporate services there before entering his current role. The world of finance is a lot smaller than you think. And Vanguard uniquely is owned by its clients, or instead by the funds they invest in. As president and CEO, Mortimer J. Buckley started his career as an assistant to the company's founder, John Bogle. Bogle, the guy who essentially invented the index fund, may not like the direction his business is going in. He's warned of ownership concentration, saying that too much money is in too few hands. Undoubtedly, asset management has made Mr. Bogle a very wealthy man, but perhaps he sees beyond that. Maybe he understands the power he and others like him have over every industry they invest in, and every investor who entrusts them. He may be issuing a warning to us all, but it's not one we're likely able to do anything about. Because these 4 companies are just too influential. A global financial system meant to empower individual investors has empowered a select few instead. So while we get distracted by celebrities' faces on the front of magazines or flashing by in our social media posts, these company leaders are behind the scenes, pulling the levers and secretly deciding the financial future of our world, whether we like it or not. The worst of them all is BlackRock. Watch this video next to understand why.
Research complete.
You wake up to the sound of the alarm on your iPhone, and annoyed that you couldn't get more sleep, you grudgingly unlock your phone to see what's going on in the world. And there's an email from Amazon telling you that your package has been delivered. So you force yourself out of bed to get the package, and it's some Johnson & Johnson medicine you ordered the night before. The wonders of overnight shipping, you think to yourself. You glance across the room to see the clock. It's 8 AM and you have to be at work by 9. Flustered, you open your Microsoft computer to answer some work emails before getting dressed. There's no time to cook breakfast, so you'll just grab something at McDonald's on your way to work. What if I told you that every single company you just interacted with within the first hour of your day is heavily influenced in large part by one company, BlackRock? Now, I'm sure you've heard about BlackRock. There are dozens of videos here on YouTube that talk about how it's the company that controls the entire world. But the reality is far less glamorous. Here is why everything you've heard about BlackRock is wrong. Before we talk about that, let's talk about data. Every time we browse on the internet, companies collect an insane amount of data from us, information which is then sold to data brokers, who in turn sell it to the highest bidder or just lose that information in data breaches. According to a report from the Identity Theft Resource Center, there were 68% more breaches in 2021 than in 2020, and that number is only going up. A few months ago, my friend got an email telling him that his information was released in a data breach from a company that he had never heard of, and read after he started getting personalized email ads from shady companies. This is how scammers are able to figure out your phone number, name, and even your address. The good news is that you can get these data brokers to delete the information they have about you. BlackRock is an investment firm that controls a huge number of shares in some of the largest companies in the world. They have a total of $10 trillion in assets across the globe. That's an amount equal to half of America's total GDP, controlled just by one company. It's easy to dismiss such a powerful company as all-out evil, but the truth is, BlackRock doesn't own these companies or even own shares of these companies. Their clients own the shares, BlackRock simply manages them. That's not to say that BlackRock doesn't have any influence on these companies, they definitely do. Because they control such an incredible amount of their stock, it's possible that companies want to keep in BlackRock's good graces, so they don't pull their investments. Now, while BlackRock might not be the evil company some people make them out to be, the truth is, there's still something very shady about them. Their hypocrisy. BlackRock was founded 34 years ago by Larry Fink, and he grew the company from $5 million in value to $8 billion in just 5 years, primarily by managing money invested by large institutions like pensions, university endowments, and substantial fortunes invested by the uber-rich. Today, Fink serves on the Council on Foreign Relations and the World Economic Forum, commanding the attention of business tycoons and political leaders around the globe, and his company is on the cusp of consolidating so much power that it could essentially control the world.
Let's talk about the speed with which we are watching this market deteriorate.
The worst day on Wall Street since the crash of 1987.
The 2008 financial crash turned out to be an incredible opportunity for BlackRock. It secured an uncontested contract to control many of the banks that had collapsed. That gave Larry Fink, who was already incredibly wealthy, even more power, and a direct line to the American government. The same thing happened in 2020, during the early days of the pandemic, when the government called in BlackRock to protect the Federal Reserve from financial fallout. Periods of economic uncertainties like these were key to BlackRock's rise to power, and as the famous saying goes, with great power comes great responsibility, and BlackRock would like you to think that they are being responsible. In the summer of 2020, while the world was angry about the murder of George Floyd, BlackRock came out with a statement saying that companies had to serve a social purpose, and that they would be giving every company an ESG, or Environmental, Social, and Governance score. Companies that promised more diversity in hiring and leadership or offered environmentally friendly policies and technology received higher scores than companies that didn't. Although this concept had been around since 2004, BlackRock became the loudest proponent of ESG investing in 2020, and in all honesty, it worked. Before this statement, ESGs were mentioned in far fewer than 1% of earnings calls, but by May 2021 that number rose to around 20%, and in a sense remained the fastest growing segment in the asset management industry. People are more concerned about the environmental and social impact of companies, and that's a good thing, right? Socially responsible companies get the upper hand in an ideal world, yes, but we all know that the world we live in is far from ideal. While there's been some positive improvement, the main result of BlackRock's ESG statement has been a massive surge in companies